This story takes place over several years and happened while I was in late high school/early community college. My two best friends lived directly across the street from one another. Mike had been there most of his life, and Rob and his parents moved in directly across the street. We used their street as a headquarters/chill spot, and would spend most of our days together. It was always us three and then random friends that would come and go as well. Since Rob's house was bigger, the three of us, along with anyone else that joined, would all gather primarily in his house, as it had a large, finished basement, and it was easier to just be teenagers down there. Rob also used it as his computer room and for band practice. Weird things started to happen that we couldn't explain. Entire groups of people were experiencing this, so I know we weren't crazy. It bothered some of us, but for the most part, we were just curious about it. Being teenagers, we all just instantly classified it as demons, of course. Off the top of my head, here are some isolated events. Heavy footsteps in the middle of the night. We went upstairs, grabbed kitchen knives, walked the whole house, even upstairs, and both his parents were dead asleep, and didn't see anything. Upon further inspection, we noticed a sand dollar decoration that Rob's mom had set on the living room coffee table was smashed to pieces, just sitting on the coffee table as if struck with a hammer. We also inspected the old grandfather clock and noticed the pendulum wasn't swinging. It usually does. The clock was icy cold to the touch. Following a party, all of us crashed in the basement. I want to say there were at least 5 people there. We kept hearing this weird 8-bit music coming from an unidentifiable source. No matter where we looked, the sound seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. None of us were able to identify what the tune or melody was. One of our friends got upset and went home. Another night, Mike saw a shadow figure go into the laundry room. It was a room connected to the basement. And when he turned the light on and went in there, of course, there was nothing there. All of us were accounted for, so it wasn't anyone pulling a prank. I wasn't there for this one, but Rob and Mike were hanging out alone at Rob's house and claimed that they had to lock themselves in one of the bedrooms upstairs, as they felt something chasing and stalking them. They heard footsteps rushing up the stairs and then at the door. Assorted random events, things being misplaced, strange sounds at night. These would happen periodically over the years. One night, Rob claims the demon showed itself to him in the basement when he was there alone. It didn't seem threatening. It was a man wearing a denim jacket, standing in the hallway propped up against the wall with his arms crossed. It then dissipated. Rob said he didn't feel threatened or scared, and that he felt rather comfortable with the ghost. There was nothing malicious about it. Since we didn't have a name for it, we decided to just name the ghost Denny because of his denim jacket. We now had a name for it and would refer to this ghost as Denny for the remainder of time. Whenever we'd see Rob at school or around town, we'd ask him if he'd seen or heard Denny. I don't actually remember if he saw the apparition again, but small things would happen here or there, and we'd all just chalk it up to Denny and move on with our days. We officially stopped being afraid of it, strangely. One day, I was hanging out with Mike and his mom across the street. Rob wasn't home, so it was just us. Mike's mom had been a local bartender in the area for decades, and we were just sharing some Denny stories with her. I'm pretty sure a Denny event happened the day prior, so we were just giving her a recap of what we'd experienced. Keep in mind, we hadn't mentioned the name Denny to her, as she didn't have any context, so we just referred to it as the ghost when speaking with her. She goes on to tell us that she knew that man that lived there before Rob and his family moved in. He was a local at the bar she worked at, and he had apparently died of brain cancer some time ago. When we asked her what his name was, she said, yeah, his name was Dennis, but we all called him Denny. I felt like I had just been struck by lightning. Rob claims the activity had stopped completely since then. Had we given this spirit peace by acknowledging him or befriending him? Did he finally go to the other side because we learned his backstory? How is it possible that he told us his name without ever actually telling us his name? I have so many questions. So I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, and I've definitely got a sensitivity to it. Sometimes it's a benevolent experience, but this one was by far the most malevolent I've ever encountered. It's also the reason I will never, ever joke about the paranormal. To set the scene, I lived off campus with friends during university in a 2-story flat. It wasn't a glamorous place. In fact, it was a bit worn down and creepy. On our first night, my best friend and I are getting settled in and start making jokes about how unsettling the place is, trying to spook each other out. Our bedrooms share a wall, so at one point, whilst going to the loo, I start tapping on the wall. And then when I came back in, I swore up and down it had nothing to do with me trying to scare her. All fun and games. Until, that is, I go back to my room to call it a night, and I can't open my door. At all. This door has no lock, and it's not jammed, but I can feel there is a weight behind it. So I shove the door, and behind it find all of my books piled up to block it. Things escalated from there. Sorry if this seems jumbled. I had a walk-in wardrobe which was always ice cold, no matter how warm the rest of the flat was. I'd shut the door to go to sleep and wake with it wide open. This room was in the centre of the footprint of the flat. It had no drafts. I ended up blocking it with furniture. The staircase to our top floor had no windows. You needed lights on all day and night to use them, which you could turn on and off at the top and bottom. Almost every time one of us used the stairs, the lights would turn off and plunge us into darkness. There was also a loft hatch in that hallway, but always had these dusty handprints which always seemed like they were in slightly different positions every now and then. The smoke alarm bleeped once every 43 seconds. For the entire time we lived there, it drove us crazy. The batteries were replaced, the alarm replaced, nothing worked, and we had to live with it. I also felt like I was always being watched. And the worst thing was if I were in the house alone on my way out, I would feel like I was being chased. I can't describe the panic I would feel. Literally like I was being driven out the door. I never felt that dread once I was outside. The final straw came one night when I was sat in bed next to my window. Out of nowhere, the window shattered next to my face, and you can bet it scared the ever-loving Scoobies out of me. I slept in my friend's room that night, thinking someone had thrown something at the window. But when I went to see in the daylight, I found that only the inside pane of the double glazing was shattered. The landlord came to check it out, and they found that a beam in the loft had broken and fallen directly above my bed. No sign of rot, etc. It just snapped. I took the hint and left that day, commuted to uni for the rest of the year. I'm convinced that whatever that thing was, it hated me. And I always felt like it's because I mocked the paranormal my first night there. In one of my many homes as a teen, we moved a lot. I realized we were sharing our home with someone else. At this point, I've experienced a fair bit of paranormal activity, and I have a pretty good nose for bad or good energies. I knew this house has no bad entities. I'm certain that this was an old man, presumably someone who once lived at the house, and every single night was the same. He would climb the stairs, walk back and forth across the landing, turning lights on and off, and then nothing. Always at 11 p.m. The noises were very distinctive. It was unmistakably the sound of someone walking at a steady pace up the full flight of stairs. The lights would click, but didn't actually turn on. It all felt very solid. So much so that the first couple of times I would go check if my sister was up. In the end, it was apparent that he was doing his own thing and wasn't bothered by us. In fact, I'm not sure he was aware of us at all. I always found him a calm presence, and I like to remember that the paranormal doesn't always need to be frightening. I was looking for a place to share this kind of thing. I have a lot of weird experiences in different places. However, it's been 8 months since I've started working on the night shift in a hotel. Nobody told me anything until I started asking because of weird experiences. My shift starts at 10 pm and ends at 8 am. I honestly love it because it gave me time to dedicate to my hobbies since I only need to answer the phone and give keys. It was rather sooner than later that I started to notice weird things. For example, it's really common to see the lights in the hallway of the second floor turning on and off during the night. Sometimes some doors will get open or closed without anyone near them. At the end of the hallway of the first floor, sometimes you can see a shadow person at the end. You can also hear someone say your name in a low tone, or hear people talking at night hours of the night. I'm the only worker at night, and most of the people that come here come for work, so they get to bed really early. The most extreme experience was a day when a girl from the morning shift got here, and we were talking in the kitchen about the day schedule. Without any warning, every cooking pot and cutting board, dozens of them in different sizes, just flew off around the kitchen. Most of my co-workers say that wouldn't work here at night because they have fear of ghosts. But honestly, I'm so used to the things that I've just go and clean any mess made by it during the night. I had been living in a flat with two of my other friends for about 4 to 5 months at this time, and nothing strange or out of the ordinary had happened at all. I was used to the sounds that they would make from their room, if any, so I would have known if it was them. I had been trying to fall asleep for about 30 minutes when I heard this tapping sound coming from my radiator, which was pretty close to my bed. I thought it was weird, but it hadn't been working since I'd moved there, so I knew it wasn't turned on or anything. It would happen in intervals, but then the tapping sounded like it was crawling up the wall. So the first couple of times, it sounded like it was coming directly from the side of me. And slowly, the tapping got higher and higher and louder each time. I kept telling myself, okay, next time this happens, I'm going to get up and turn on the light and see what's happening. But I kept being too scared to move. The tapping sound eventually stopped, but then a few moments later, I had this really creepy, low whispering voice in my ear. If I were to say it sounded more like a female voice, but it was so low and disgruntled, I really had no idea. The first time it happened, I just thought to myself, holy fuck, I need to fall asleep. Thinking I was just really tired and it was from a lack of sleep or something. Then it happened again. The exact same voice. I have no idea what it was saying, but it was clearly trying to say something to me. The first two were pretty quiet, but then when the third one was a little bit louder, I said, oh fuck it, I'm going to talk to my flatmate. I went into his room and asked him, hey man, are you hearing anything weird? I keep hearing this weird tapping in my room and it sounds like someone's whispering in my ear. He said no, but then I asked him if he could come into my room for a few minutes to see if anything happened. And when we went into my room and turned on the lights and sat there for a bit, nothing happened. So I just went back to his room with him and was like, fuck it. If anything else happens, I'll tell you. Now his room was right next to mine. And as soon as I closed his door and opened mine, right when I closed my door, the voice was literally right in my ear and was the loudest it had been. And this time, it sounded very angry. And it had happened when the lights were on. I screamed after being scared shitless and ran back into my friend's room and told him what had happened. And we immediately decided to leave and stay the night at my friend's house. Nothing else happened the rest of the time I stayed there, but it definitely made me scared for the rest of the time being there. Since then, I haven't had anything like this happen to me. Each time I tell this story, it gives me the chills. Easily one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. I've had what can only be described as haunting when I moved into my first flat in Colchester, and I've been followed by something. I was very fortunate in getting the main suite when I moved into the new building. The building is owned by the owner of the George Hotel. This isn't surprising, as the building that was turned into flats is directly next to the George Hotel itself. If you know, you know. The George is famous for being haunted. At the time, the refurbishments had just finished from an old office, I think, to the new 6 properties in the building. I was in my early 20s and was really enjoying the fact that my new flat was roughly 12 footsteps from a large, popular high street bar. Bringing girls back was why. I was number 6 and everything seemed really cool. I was happy and enjoying having my own space as I had just moved out of my parents' house. For some reason, after about 6 months or so, I'd wake up and go to my kitchen and find my bin toppled over and my kettle had been moved. At the time, I didn't believe in such things and just ignored it, thinking there was a rational explanation for everything, right? One day, I was taking my bin bags out to the outside bins for collection when I heard, "Lawrence, can you come here for a moment?" It was my neighbour, Alana. My first thought was, oh man, what now? Have I been gaming too loudly at night or something? But no, she seemed very worried. I remember this conversation like it was yesterday. "Alana, so I need to ask you something, but I don't want to make you think I'm crazy or anything like that, but have you noticed anything weird happening around here?" Me. My bin, toaster, and kettle seem to move on their own, but I'm sure it's all due to something explainable, right? Like building work making the building shake or something. Alana, I'm so happy you said that. I don't think that's quite it, as more violent things are happening to be in my flat. At this point, I knew she was going to say ghosts or something. And as I say, I was very skeptical then. I wasn't going to be rude about it, so I thought I would just hear her out, reassure her, and then go back to doing what I was doing. This isn't exactly how it went. Alana, who's a very strong, independent, rational, and intelligent person, went on to explain how her duvet has been ripped off of her during the night, and things like her bin lid had been thrown at her with extreme force, as well as things not being where they're supposed to live, just everyday items around the house. Alana took a photo of her fridge. There was a legitimate reason why, but I can't remember. Something about showing her mum what the flat looked like or something. Alana was alone at the time, but in the picture, the reflection on the fridge door reflected the image of her bed, studio flat. And there's a man, clear as day, sitting on the end. Alana lives alone. I live alone, so I had no explanation. A few nights later, there was a knock on the door, and when I answered, it was her. No hello or sorry to disturb you this late. All she said was, "I need to stay here tonight." Bit forward, but whatever. I made up my bed for her and I slept on the sofa in the living room. During that night, my Xbox controller was launched right at my head, breaking it. The controller, not my head, although it hurt like a bitch. This went on for some time and Alana kept staying at mine, which, during that time, we went on some dates and decided to get together. The process of living together made for a very active nightlife in my flat. On one occasion, my speakers that were not plugged into the power outlet, nor my PC, let out a very loud growl around 3 a.m. I jumped out of bed trying to figure out if there was a grizzly bear. But Alana says, "Go back to sleep, it's fine. It's just him again." I'd had enough by this point, so agreed with Alana, who had been pestering me, to bring a medium into the flat. I really didn't believe any of that stuff at the time, but if it meant I could sleep again, then I would try anything. The medium came by 2 days later and refused to go in either mine or Alana's flat. She was saying things like, "He's really angry and hates women," or he doesn't like men standing in his way. She did say something weird that I still don't quite understand to this day, which was, there's a portal between the 2 front doors, number 5 and number 6. She left, saying that her presence was making it worse. Honestly, at the time, I thought she was quoting Paranormal Activity, the movie, to look cool. Fat load of goods she was, but we ended up calling her back because something truly awful happened. Roughly a week later, Alana was walking around the flats between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m. I turned the lights on and was asking what she was doing, and she wouldn't respond. She was ice cold and wouldn't talk, but she wouldn't stop staring at me no matter where I was. Okay, so up to now I've been patient, but it's fucking 3 a.m, so if the problem won't leave, what happens if I remove us from the problem? Should fix it, right? I got her dressed and coat on, and we walked out of the flats and up the road, where Alana began speaking, saying things like, "We need to go back." That chance, love. That place sucks. We got about 3 blocks away, and then Alana said something that legit scared me. "Why are we outside by the post office?" Okay, well, I think we should move is why we are here. We eventually moved together, but paranormal activity in general would keep happening where we moved. But I can safely say this was nowhere near as angry as whatever the fuck was back at the high street. Due to all the stress of it all, we broke up and went our separate ways. Since then, I got the odd bit of paranormal activity all these years later. I'm 31 and very happy with my new partner, but I wish I knew why that happened and why I still get things happen from time to time. If anyone can enlighten me or educate me on what exactly happened, I would greatly appreciate it. One last additional piece of information is that the medium person said that I'm a beacon. I looked it up and I'm still unsure. I was about 10 or 11 years old when we moved in, and I was excited that we were moving from a small house next to a main busy road in the town centre to an area where there is so much room to explore. I knew that the new house was bigger and had a garden and a woodland area, locally known as Friday Woods, which is just shy of 380 acres approximately. I was thrilled knowing that I could potentially build a fort with sticks and leaves, go camping, walking and exploring, which to an 11-year-old boy was enough to sell me on the move. After the move, it was officially day 1 of living in the new house, and I begged my dad, "Can we go in the woods yet?" My dad has always been fair, so he asked my older sister, 14 years old at the time, to take me. The rules were not to wander away from the path, because he didn't want us to get lost or stuck. My sister had a friend over who agreed to come with us. The 3 of us set off, and all was well. I couldn't resist but to pick up a stick and pretend it was a sword or a gun, with a want for explanation. About 5 to 10 minutes into the walk, I thought I saw movement in the trees off the path to my left, and spoke up about it. My sister suggested that it might be an animal, and said we should check it out just in case we get lucky on seeing wildlife for the first time. About 100 yards in, there was what looked like a makeshift fence made out of sticks and twigs that went around in a large circle, and in the middle was a hole. The hole was about 2 to 3 feet deep, but was about 8 feet wide all the way around. There was a lot of, "I wonder what this is for," until it started. My sister let out a scream and ran. Me and her friend followed, asking what happened and if she was okay. She said something whispered in her ear and grabbed her shoulder. That's about all I know about that, because she was inconsolable after that. Her friend at that moment let out a scream, saying that she saw something, and she then grabbed my wrist and we ran back down the path, back to the woods entrance and to the house. I really don't remember that much about what happened at home, because my mum and dad had to sit with my sister and her friend behind closed doors to reassure them and make sure they were okay. Like I said, I wasn't in the room at the time. Once they finished talking, they spoke to me. I suppose it's easy to convince a 10-year-old that it was a trick of the light or something. I wasn't overly aware of what just happened, because at that age, it was easy to dismiss things like that due to a lack of knowledge. Ignorance really is bliss. I still haven't found out any more about what happened to my sister, because every time I bring it up, she tells me to drop it and ignore it. And if I press for more information, then she gets apoplectic and shouts at me to drop it. As you can tell, I gave up with that years ago. So that's the prologue, I guess, because that brings up to present day, where a lot has changed. I lived in Cambridge for about 5 years, where I studied at university to get my bachelor's degree. During my last year of university, COVID hit the UK and hit it hard. We were locked down and many were on furlough, while others just straight up lost their job. This means that for a new graduate, there was no work available. My dad agreed to let me come home for a bit while we let COVID blow over for the most part. This is where I am today. I'm job searching and waiting. A few weeks ago, I thought I'd better start exercising and began running and going for walks in the woods to help break up the day. There was never anyone around during the day, so I didn't have to wear a mask. It was perfect. On one of my walks, I walked past the entrance to the witch's den without realizing. It had been so long. When I thought I could hear a girl's voice. It wasn't like a stereotypical witch-like voice with the cackling laughter, green skin on a broomstick type voice. It was way more gentle and sounded younger. I heard it over my headphones and it immediately stopped me in my tracks. I turned and I started walking through the bushes and trees. The voice sounded like a young woman stuck and was shouting for help. I kept going, but the voice sounded eerily comforting and inviting in a pure and innocent way. When I came to the conclusion I fell over, it was the hole in the middle of the witch's den. It was silent. I snapped out of it and decided to get out of there. My mind started going a mile a second as I ran out. How can the girl just stop asking for help and disappear? It was a kind voice, so why did the girl scream all those years ago? Why did I even walk in there in the first place? It's been a few days since then, and I've tried to ignore it, but I keep seeing a light in the distance from my bedroom window. The witch's den isn't far and can see, just barely, it through the trees. The lights look like people dancing, except they're made of light and dance through the trees.